We now come to our time of Bible study in which we learn about our theme for the day from the Scriptures and how we can be inspired by those Scriptures to understand more clearly how we are to gain strength and courage to live these days. Everybody has a burden they have to bring with them in this life. Everybody has a struggle. We know that. Some are doing maybe a better job than others in handling it, but we all have a burden to carry. And so it's important for us to understand how we can get strength and courage to face these things. So we start today with a reading from the Old Testament. This day we start with a reading from the book of Numbers. Now the book of Numbers is a book that was created originally because the people of Israel had been commanded by God to take a census. And this was probably somewhere around 1000 BC. We don't know the exact time, but census was not one of the more usual things that people did. But they wanted to have a census of how many Israelitic people there were. And so they took a census, and when they were counting up all of the people and dividing them up into groups and so forth, they remembered the stories that they had been told about how the nation came to be and what it experienced and who Moses was and what Moses had done for them and all those kinds of things. And that ultimately got put into a book. And of course it was called Numbers because it was originally about the census. And in that book we find a lot of important things being said. And one of the most important things that's being said is what we're going to be looking at here today. And that was this question that the people of Israel had, which they had found an answer for. But the question was, if they actually had a good relationship with God, what could they expect from that? What would be the benefits of that? And the problem they had was many times they didn't have such a good relationship with God. They had wandered off and gone their own way and done their own thing. But if they did have that good relationship, what could they expect? And that's what is answered in this passage from Numbers today. So I'm going to read the passage first. It comes from the 14th chapter, verses 5 through 9. Then Moses and Aaron fell down in front of the whole assembly of the Israelite people that day. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephthah were among those also. And they had all explored the land. And they tore their clothes and said to the entire assembly, "The land we passed through is exceptionally beautiful and exceptionally good. So let us know this. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will give us that land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Only we must not rebel against the Lord. And do not be afraid of the people in that land. But understand this, that in God, those who are against God's protection is gone. And those who are with the Lord is with them. So do not be afraid of what you face." Amen to that. The concept was they were understanding that if they had a good relationship with God, they would find in that relationship the strength to do what they needed to do and the courage to do it. And they had no reason to be fearful of any situation or circumstance. Of course, on the other hand, if they rebelled against God and they didn't have a good, close, tight relationship, then they could not count on that strength and that courage. So from the Old Testament then, we get the idea from a long time ago. 1000 BC is a long time ago. The idea was that those who have a good relationship with the Creator, the maintainer of all reality, those who have that good relationship with God can count upon gaining from it the strength and the courage to conquer whatever it is they need to conquer. And so we keep that in mind as we move through our celebration of that today. Now we go to the New Testament, to the book of, the letter actually, of Romans, which Paul wrote, one of the really great writings of the New Testament. And in this letter, he's writing to the Christians at Rome. And the general problem there in those days was that Diocletian, the king, the emperor of Rome, had decided to start persecuting Christians and was killing Christians, feeding them to lions in the Colosseum as entertainment. It was a bad time to be a Christian in Rome, and a lot of people were suffering because of their Christian faith. And so Paul wrote this letter of Romans to them to remind them of a lot of important things. But the thing he reminds them about here today, you're going to hear in just a moment, is this idea of hope. Hope for a better day coming. Right now may not be such a great time, but a better day comes. And this was a critical understanding of the Christian faith. And so he writes to them these words about keeping that hope alive. And let's hear it now from the 8th chapter of Romans. Brothers and sisters, we know that the whole creation has been groaning in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, we have been groaning in the fruits of the Spirit, and we have been groaning inwardly as we wait eagerly for the day of our adoption, the redemption of our souls. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for that which we do not have, we wait for it patiently. So here Paul gives the Christian folks this idea that hope is also another source of strength and courage. If you have hope of a new day coming, if you have hope of a victory coming, then you can wait patiently for that day. And why can you wait patiently? Because the hope gives you this strength and courage to wait patiently for that day to come. So, another thought is given to us here in the Scriptures about where we can get strength and courage. Not only from a good relationship with God, as it shows us in Numbers, but if we have hope of a new day coming. From that hope, we can gain the strength and courage to face the day we face today. Then finally we come now to the gospel reading, and in honor of the gospel reading, we all rise to hear this gospel from the Gospel of Mark. So please stand with me as I read to you the story we will focus upon today from the Gospel of Mark. Another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and there was a man there with a shriveled hand. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Come here and stand in front of everyone." And then Jesus asked everyone there, "Which is it lawful to do on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To kill or to save a life?" But they all remained silent. So Jesus looked around at them in anger, and he was deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And so he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to talk to each other about how they might kill this Jesus. Amen. You can be seated. Shriveled hand is one of the key words in this gospel. Another translation has the expression withered hand, but it's a hand that is drawn back in on itself. It can't get a blood supply, so it gets withered and it gets smaller and shorter, and the person cannot use a withered hand. They cannot use a shriveled hand. It was considered to be a deformity in that time. And so we are put into the context of a man who is unable to reach for what he really wants to have. Keep that in mind as we have our message today. Maybe sometimes we have experienced the inability to reach for the kind of life we really want to have. What would stop us? What would cause our inability to reach for that which we really want? Because I think that's what our context is about here in this gospel reading today. It's about being able not just to stretch our hand, but to stretch our faith so we can reach for that which God would want us to reach for. So we're going to be looking at this as we have our message today, but we want to learn that from the challenge that says, believe you can do it. Believe that with God you can do it, is a very important thing to keep in mind when we're looking for a source of strength and courage. Whoever believes that with God they can do whatever they need to do can find the ability to do it. So that's another thought that comes to us today. This one from the gospel reading. So we have these three thoughts then about how we find strength and courage to live these days. And we're going to go back and look at the key verses together here and read them in both English and Spanish. And you find them in your program. So let's start with the reading from the Old Testament. Read with me. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land and give it to us. And then from the Spanish we find these words. Si el Señor se acordara de nosotros, nos guiará más allá, nos guiará. And then from Romans we have this expression. But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. And in Spanish, pero si esperamos todavía no tenemos en la espera And then from our gospel reading in English we have, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out and his hand was completely restored. And in Spanish, extiende tu mano, así que la extendió